has 2 thumbs and was overly ambitious with their February TBR? This gal! Hey everyone! Feeney from Feeney Reads. Welcome back to my channel. Today with my February wrap-up and March TBR. And from then, I apologize for that silly intro. You see that my February TBR that I put together was a bit too ambitious for the February that I actually had. So let's talk about this a little bit. I'm going to start as per usual with some stats on how my February went, and then I will talk about the books that I actually read in February. And then I will finish it out with the books I'm planning on reading in March, and we will see if I am learning from my mistakes or not. Spoiler, it probably not. Let's talk about stats in February. I read a total of 6 books. One of them was a DNF though, with a total of 1,875 pages. So that already shows you it was a lot of shorter books. The mix of authors is 3 male, 2 female, and 1 non-binary author. 1 author is from the Middle East, the rest is North America. 4 fantasy books and then 2 sci-fi. 3 books of that I read on my Kindle, 2 physical, and then 1 audio book combo. 4 of these authors were new to me. 2 of these authors I've read books from before. Then I read 3 standalones. I started 2 series, but I also continued 1 series. So, you know, there are good things in there. And then my ratings are all over the place. So I'll just talk about it while I'm talking about the books, and it will give you pretty quickly, it will give you an idea of, you know, where my ratings are with those books. The first book that I read was Brandon Sanderson's Tress of the Emerald Sea. I still keep thinking, is it sea or sky? But it's sea. It plays on an ocean, so it's definitely sea. That was my very first Sanderson book that I've read ever, and I'm excited. I loved it so much. I ate it up. I read it so quickly. I cannot wait for the hardcover version of that, to see all the art that is in there, because it's put together really beautifully. I've been told by many people now that this is not a typical Sanderson, but I love the narration style. I love the story. I love the whimsical feel of it. And it was just an amazing reading experience. And it was just so much fun. It was just a really good time reading this. I love the characters. Everything about it. There was nothing. I mean, the ending fell a bit flat for me, I have to say. I would have wished that it would have turned out a little bit differently for our main characters. But overall, it was just a really entertaining story. That you can't say it any differently. It's nothing serious. If you are kind of in a reading slump, I could see this being a great read to get out of this reading slump, because it's easy to understand. It's nothing complicated. It's just a good time. That's all I can say. And now I'm really looking forward to all the other Secret Project books. And I also got myself the new Mistborn cover, at least the first book, because I'm really loving that cover and the color scheme and everything. I don't like the other covers that I've seen so much. So I hope I can adventure into some other Brandon Sanderson works eventually. Book number 2 that I read in February is in anticipation of book 3 that is going to be released at the end of April. This was a reread for me. I should have said that in my stats earlier. 1 book was a reread for me. Gunmetal Gods is amazing. I loved it even more on reread than I loved it the first time I read it. I even updated my review on Goodreads, so I put a link on that down below so you can read that. I'm fascinated by how Zamil Akhtar is able to explain the world and make it so vivid and colorful. I don't know, it's hard to put in words, but just from an atmosphere, it is fantastic. Like, he really brings out the Middle Eastern inspiration in this book and makes it accessible for someone who is not an expert in Middle Eastern mythology or Middle Eastern history. It is so well done, and you can smell the food, you can see the colors, and it's just so vivid that, I don't know, I love this book. I love his writing as well. Like the way he walks through the story, and it's such a fast-paced story too, but you never feel lost, really. The first time I did, but now the second time around, I never felt lost. I actually got so much more out of it. I saw so many more connections now, and I appreciated like the character work and the plotting and world building so much more. So I'm really looking forward to continuing the series and finally reading book 3. A lot of trigger warnings on this one. This is really dark and bleak. Just in case you haven't read Gunmetal Gods yet and you're interested in picking it up, just be aware of that. A lot of gore. There's still that one scene in there that is kind of an incest scene, but not really, but it's still, you know. So if this is something you're sensitive to, you know, definitely look up the trigger warnings on this book. But I would love to see this as a TV or movie adaptation. I would be so down for that. Next up is a book that I hope you don't see the smudges on this one. Stephanie Hansen's Ghostly Howls. That was an escapist book tour that I signed up for because I haven't done one in a while, and I thought this is nice and short. Let me do that. I'm torn on this one. First of all, I'm loving the cover. So the cover is amazing on this book. Ghostly Howls is an urban fantasy inspired by Irish mythology. It has a really diverse cast of characters, which I appreciate. And I think the quote-unquote magical abilities are really interesting. I don't remember having read an urban fantasy book or generally a fantasy book with these type of magical abilities. So it is unique in that sense. Not that they have never been done before, but the way she translated it, I think, worked really well. I'm not sure if I'm making sense right now. What I think is missing is detail. This book could have been so much more. It should not be a 100-page novella. This should be a full, fleshed out 300, 400, 500-page book. Do you ever have conversations? I know I do with my husband all the time. Where you think through something in your head and, you know, you weighed some things and you went down this way and then that way and then you came to a conclusion and then you start talking. But the way you talk is with all your thought process in mind. The other person doesn't have that thought process and doesn't know what you went through in your head already. So they understand it, but only half of it. That's how I felt with this book. I felt Stephanie Hansen had a fully fleshed out story in her head with a lot of detail and a lot of just plot devices and a lot of action. And then she only put parts of that into the actual book, which led to a reading experience where you have like a bunch of gaps that either allow you to let your own imagination run wild, or that could cause you to pause and be like, what's this? You know? So I wish she would have taken the time and wrote down everything she had in her head. And then I think this could be an amazing urban fantasy book because there's so much there. There's so many unique things in this story that would be worth exploring even more. I'm glad I read it. Don't get me wrong. I'm glad I read it. I definitely want to check out Stephanie Hansen's other books. I think she has a bunch more and see if the other books are similar or if in other stories she did exactly that and fleshed them out a bit more and added a bit more detail to the story. But very promising, I have to say, from an imaginative point of view. The next book was completely not planned. Originally, I wanted to read The Bone-Shot Daughter by Andrea Stewart in February, and I had it in my hands, and I was like, I'm not quite feeling it. So I picked up a random book from one of my stacks, which was Vengeful by V.E. Schwab, which is book 2 in the, is it called the Villain series, I think? By the way, big shout out to Erin. Thank you so much for gifting me this book. I'm so glad I read it. So, quick summary. I read Vicious, the first book, a while ago. Jake from the Bookish Drummer picked that for my TBR, I think in November, December. I'm not 100% sure anymore. Could have been October too. And since then, because I really enjoyed that book, since then I wanted to read book 2. Actually, when I started this, I was kind of in a weird, funky reading mood. I was like, I just need something, and it's probably not going to go well. Whatever I'm picking up, I'm not, And then it really surprised me. And I think this surprise also came from all the reviews that are out there about this duology, which is, by the way, I think a trilogy now. I think I saw a third book coming out of that. Anyway, it seems that readers either really enjoyed the first book and didn't like the second book at all, or the other way around. I've never heard anything different. I have to say, I love them both equally, but for very different reasons. Where book one was a lot about morals and that there is no black and white, and that there's the exploration of what someone thinks is good, how it is perceived from others. This book is more character driven, and it's more about the backstory of some of the characters from book one. It's bringing in new characters, so this feels more actually like a story now, and this feels more like something more on the entertainment side, less kind of what's the moral of the story type of thing. And I loved it. Like, I find the writing style really interesting. I find there's a lot of, in book one too, a lot of back and forth time jumps in there. I mean, it's not a 5-star, it's more a 4-star book, like book one is a 4-star book too. But I'm so glad I read this series, because I read Eddie LaRue by her and I didn't like it. It was too slow and was kind of, what's the point of the story? So I didn't enjoy that as much. So I'm glad I gave this author another chance. And I definitely want to try her, I think it's a middle grade fairy tale inspired book, something with Witch in the Forest, I'm not sure. And then the other trilogy that plays in London, Dark Shade of Magic, something like that. And then I thought it's about time that I continue with the Spacefic semifinalists, because we have to have them done by the end of April. By the way, for Spacefic, for the semifinalists, because we have to review all the 6 books that we are reading, what I decided to do is, instead of doing one video per book and review each individual book on its own, because that would be 6 weeks of videos, and I don't want to do that since I'm currently only putting out one video a week, I decided to make it a review vlog. So what I started doing already is just checking in every now and then, super casual. I've never done a vlog, so I have actually no idea what I'm doing, but I'm just checking in every now and then and talk about what I think about the book. So there will be more details about all the Spacefic books in a separate video, so I'm not going into super detail right now. I started with The View from Infinity Beach by RPL Johnson. This is a more YA science fiction space opera. It's like a coming-of-age story, sci-fi space opera. And that was a DNF for me, unfortunately. And it's not because I didn't really enjoy it. I mean, I wasn't super vibing with it, but I just saw too many things going on in the book that I didn't think a semi-finalist or a finalist should have. Like, there were some editing issues in there were some plot issues in there, a lot of repetition in words. Again, in the vlog I'm going a little bit more into detail into this one. And then the second book that I picked up was The Audacity by Laura Carmen Loop, which is also a sci-fi space opera. I don't know if I would call it that. It's more like a really quirky story, very much inspired by Hitchhiker's Guide Through the Galaxy. So the narration style and the way the story is told, the way the characters are put together, is very reminiscent of Hitchhiker's Guide Through the Galaxy. This I finished. I overall liked it. I'm not super impressed with it, but that is again more a me issue, because I didn't vibe with the humor as well. And similar to one of the quarterfinalists of my team, where I said I think it's a really good book, the humor just didn't work for me. And if the humor doesn't work for you, the whole book kind of falls apart. Very similar with The Audacity. It's so based off of that humor that if you don't like it, or if this is just not your thing, the whole book is kind of But if you like it, you're going to like the book. Like, if you're a fan of like 50s vibes and Hitchhiker's Guide Through the Galaxy type of plotting and narration, you should definitely check it out. So that was what I actually finished in February. I started 2 more books in February, one which I actually wanted to finish in February, but then, my husband had a birthday on the 28th, and then I wasn't able to read because we went out. Bummer. So I finished it on March 1st. So it's my first March book. By the way, I'm kidding. I'm not mad that my husband had a birthday and we went out. Like, it was a great evening. So Bubbles in Space was also a spacefic book, also a first in the series, also a detective story. it like that's one thing that I find interesting, and you can take it as a good or negative. It's just, for me, it's just an interesting fact. There are a lot of detective stories in this space fic round. This was also a more noir inspired detective story with a cyborg. She gets framed for murder that she didn't do, and then she is trying to unravel it, and that's kind of the story. Rather short too. I think it's like also a 260 page. By the way, the first two books were also rather short, like 200 somewhat pages. This one I found interesting. It is usually also not my style, so I was not a huge fan of the writing style. It was just, I just don't like that type of writing style. It's this typical noir detective story. Pulp. That's what the author used to describe it. Noir pulp detective story. I'm not a fan of that type of narration or writing style, but I liked the main character. I thought she was sassy and fun. I liked the sidekick she had, was like a little AI pig, and I found the plot itself interesting enough. And this one didn't have a bunch of like editing issues and plot issues and whatnot, so the whole story actually made sense compared to some of the other books. At the same time I started Bubbles in Space, I also started Deadhouse Gates, book 2 in the Malazan series by Stephen Erickson. This is the German version. This is also not the entire Deadhouse Gates. That is part 1 of Deadhouse Gates. Part 2 of Deadhouse Gates is a separate book. I started reading that also in February, and I'm hoping to finish this in March because, man, I'm really enjoying this. I am loving the writing style. I am loving the characters. I just love everything about this book. This is amazing storytelling. It's really just what it is. I also want to shout out Tim Strätmann, who is the translator for this book, because as I said, I'm reading this in German, and he did an amazing job. I've never read these in English, so I don't know how my reading experience would be if I would read it in the original language it was written in. It's so easy to immerse myself into this and to just fall into this book head first and be completely in this world, seeing everything he's describing. He's so good at telling you who the characters are without it being info dumpy. The kind of the flair of the book is just also so vivid and exciting, and man, if that wasn't clear, I'm really excited about this one. One more space fic that I already started and, well, DNF'd, to be honest, is The Clarity of Cold Steel by Kevin Wright. Also a detective story, also written in that kind of noir mystery kind of narration style. Unfortunately, also plot issues, inconsistency, there are some editing issues, and this one is more so than the other one that I DNF'd because I just didn't enjoy the reading experience. The way the story is told is just not something I enjoy. There is no point in me continuing. I know judging needs to be objective and I need to give it a chance and like all of those things, but if I force myself through the book, the rating will suffer eventually because there is no such thing as objective rating. I didn't vibe with the character. I didn't vibe with the whole ambience of all the men are ugly, all the women are sexy, all the women are flirting with him. Like, come on, we're way over all of this. I don't mind noir detective stories, but then get over the 50s and 60s. I know everything that happened back then. And if I would read a book from the 50s, 60s, or whatever, older, one thing, I wouldn't bother with this as much. But the one thing that I actually like about the sci-fi genre is you can explore. You can take something that has been done and try to make it better. I don't know. Anyway, long story. I ranted about it yesterday night for the vlog, so you'll get the rant in that video. I apologize to the author. It's just, I needed to let those feelings out. I'm sure there's a market for that. I'm not the target market for this book. Which then moves into, just to finish it out, there are two more space fic books that I want to read in March. One is Ax and Ex Machina by G.S. Jensen. That is the one that I already started, but I just read one chapter last night, so I can't say much about it yet. It's a space opera too. And then I have one book left, which is Titan Hoppers by Rob J. Hayes, which would be my first Rob J. Hayes book as well. Both of these, Ax and Ex Machina and the Titan Hoppers, are 400 plus pages, so they will take me a little bit longer. But honestly, I'm here for something that is a bit more immersive, and I like big books. what can I say? Talking about big books, the other books that I want to tackle in March are The Return of the King by Tolkien. I want to finish out the series because isn't March also the month of sequels or something? I don't know. March of sequels, I don't know. The other two books, probably not a huge surprise. One is Conqueror's Blood by Zamil Akhtar, which is book 2 in the Gunmetal God saga. As you've heard earlier already, I want to read the series in anticipation of Elder Epoch coming out at the end of April, like I think it's April 27th or something, so well, I have to wait. And the last book that I want to read in March that I wanted to read in February already is The Bone-Shard Daughter by Andrea Stewart. I will see if I will continue with book 2 also in March. I'm not sure. By the way, if you want to join me in reading the Gunmetal God saga and the Drowning Empire, we have buddy reads on the Keymark Discord for all of them. Don't forget to subscribe. If you like my ramblings today, don't forget to like this video. I really appreciate it. Thank you everyone for joining me in my rambly book journey. And yeah, then there's nothing else to say. Then I hope you have a great rest of your day and that I'll see you soon with my next video. Bye!